Now we're going to move on to Prop 20. Should California law be amended to make changes to the process by which people are charged with certain crimes and the process for granting them parole? The people who support Prop 20 say that Prop 20 prevents violent criminals from getting out of prison early, and that collecting DNA from people convicted of drug possession or shoplifting will help solve more serious crimes such as rape. People opposed to Prop 20 say that California already has some of the toughest laws against serious and violent crime, and that Prop 20 wastes millions of dollars on prisons that could be spent on education, healthcare, or affordable housing. We will begin with opening statements from the proponents of Prop 20, and representing them is Rob Lawrence.
Ron Lawrence, representing the California Police Chiefs Association. 332 municipal police chiefs in California support Proposition 20. Does four things. Most importantly, it expands the list of which violent crimes are not considered violent in California. You might be appalled to hear this, as all our police chiefs are. Certain crimes such as human trafficking of a child, abduction of a minor for prostitution, these are not violent crimes in California and therefore eligible for early release. Rape by intoxication, rape of an unconscious person. A drive-by shooting is not a violent crime in California. Felony domestic violence is not a violent crime in California. Solicitation to commit murder, and the list goes on and on. There's 22 of them. Proposition 20 puts these violent crimes, these heinous crimes, right back into the right category and categorizes them as violent crimes, and therefore makes them ineligible for early release, therefore giving the victims in California a voice. The second thing that Proposition 20 will do is addresses the serial theft rings in California. It's no secret that since Prop 47 was passed, we've had our local businesses in our communities just ravaged by these organized retail theft rings. They go up and down our state, they'll drop off into one city and go to the next, and they can steal up to $950 because anything less than $950 is a misdemeanor. They don't go to jail even if they get caught. They get a citation with a court date because the jail's full and it's only a misdemeanor. Proposition 20 will help address this because on the third conviction, not arrest, by the way, conviction, and not the first one, not the second one, but the third conviction, if somebody got arrested and convicted 3 times for theft, for shoplifting, then they can be charged as a wobbler, which means the district attorney has the option, case by case, to file that as a wobbler, either as a felony or a misdemeanor. And to make sure that we have the ability to address these organized retail theft rings. It also, on that third conviction, lowers the threshold from $950 down to $250. This is critically important for California because our local businesses, your businesses in your town, have lost billions of dollars since Prop 47 has passed. It's so bad that we have retail stores that have stopped calling the police because they know that there's no accountability for theft. You can go to any city, any town in California and talk to your local businesses, and they'll tell you a thief can come into their store, they can shoplift up to $950, and even if they're caught, they get a ticket. They can walk right across the street to another store, steal another items up to $950, and keep doing that all day long because these crimes are not aggregated. So Prop 20 fixes this and it helps us address this, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with the District Attorneys Association who prosecute these crimes to make sure that we can hold those retail theft crimes accountable. Fourth thing it does, Proposition 20 empowers the Parole Board of Hearings to consider an inmate's entire criminal history, not just their most recent charge. Since prison realignment was enacted, the Parole Board can only consider an inmate's most recent charge. Well, why is this important? Because there's some very bad actors in prison. There's some people that have been convicted of homicide, rape, child molest. And these individuals, you have to look at the totality of their criminal history. They might be out on parole, and they get rearrested on some low-level crime, maybe a property crime, maybe a vandalism, maybe a burglary, maybe they violated their parole terms and they're back in prison. The parole board can only consider that most recent charge. They cannot consider those previous heinous crimes. That individual may need a lot more rehabilitation, whether it's mental health help, whether it's addiction help, anger management, whatever, they still need that help. The last thing that Proposition 20 does is it allows us to collect DNA samples on those that we arrest that were removed from felonies to misdemeanors as a result of Prop 47. DNA sample collection is critically important for policing, not only to identify and apprehend the appropriate suspects of a crime, but more importantly, to exonerate those people who are innocent from committing crimes. So DNA samples have become the crime-fighting tool of the 21st century, just like fingerprints were back in the day. So we urge you a Prop 20 yes vote.
Dan Seaman, opposing Prop 20.
Good evening, everyone. Dan Seaman speaking for the No on 20 campaign. I served as a criminal justice advisor to the last two governors overseeing corrections and public safety policy. I've worked with Chief Lawrence in the past, and I have a lot of respect for him. And we've worked well together in the past on a number of issues. Unfortunately, we just have a fundamental disagreement on this proposition. What you just heard was an amalgamation of 4 different policies jammed into one ill-conceived ballot initiative. And honestly, we're kind of lucky with this, with Prop 20. We have the benefit of hindsight here. This is the rare opportunity where you actually know through 30 years of lived experience what these policies will give us in terms of public safety and safety in our communities. And the answer is you won't get more safety. We've spent the last 30 years on a mass incarceration binge. California has been one of the highest incarceration rates in the entire world. And what have we got? For that money and for that time and for that human suffering, we haven't gotten more safety in our communities. The truth of the matter is crime has actually dropped over the last 10 years since realignment, since 2010. We now, a report out this week has shown that we have the lowest crime rate now in California since we started collecting stats at the Department of Justice. Those are crimes that are tracked, specifically including many of the crimes that the chief referenced. So what really we have here is a emotional appeal to scare tactics that we've seen before. We've seen this movie before, and we know what we get for this effort, and it's not much. What we need is proven investments and crime-fighting strategies like community investment, diversion, restorative justice, rehabilitation and reentry in prison. Those are the things that make us safe. Those are the things that have allowed us to save money on our prison budget. Those are the things that have allowed us to have a crime rate go down. So going quickly through those points, the chief mentioned victims groups. The largest victims group in the state, the Californians for Safety and Justice, opposes this measure. Several elected DAs of the largest counties in California oppose this measure. The Partnership to End Domestic Violence opposes this measure because this does nothing to actually serve victims of crime. In fact, the changes to property theft, making one of the lowest felony thresholds in the country, would actually result in a budget cut to trauma recovery centers and programs that serve victims in the state. So when we talk about victims, we should actually ask victims what they want. And resoundingly, the largest groups of crime victims in the state roundly reject this measure. With regard to shoplifting and organized retail theft, this does not solve any problem. Prop 20 does not solve the problem of theft. We had shoplifting prior to Prop 47. We have it now at a lower rate, in fact. And under California law, those organized retail theft rings that were referenced can be charged as felonies. There's an organized retail theft felony in California that can be charged. Those charges can actually be aggregated under People v. Bailey, which is case law in California and hasn't been abrogated by any act of the legislature, any initiative. So those multiple small level thefts can actually already be brought into one larger grand theft charge. So at the end of the day, the solutions, quote unquote, that are being put forward don't actually solve the purported problem. And we know that from lived experience. So I would urge us not to spend tens of millions of dollars more on state prison and incarcerating people when we actually have proven strategies that we're embarking on now in California.
Thank you. Now, Dan, your question for the supporters of Prop 20.
Yeah, I would like to hear, Chief, sort of your explanation for how incarceration and more incarceration in California is going to solve the problems of mental health treatment, homelessness, economic inequality that we all know are the root drivers of crime. I'd also want to ask sort of why would we want $250 a stolen bike to be a felony when today we have all of the tools at our disposal to arrest, prosecute, and convict people for theft?
Well, in all fairness, that was 2 questions, but I'll do my best. With regards to, and I'll keep it specific to Prop 20, because your first question was really not really only about Prop 20, but Proposition 20 doesn't put one more person in prison. It only keeps those in prison who committed these heinous crimes. There's 22 of those nonviolent crimes, and it would make them ineligible for early release. It doesn't put them back in prison. These are people that already committed those crimes. And as far as the shoplifting goes, Proposition 20 is very explicit that those folks cannot go to prison. If they're convicted a third time, 3 convictions, then they can either get put into drug rehabilitation or rehabilitative programs or county jail, but not prison. In regard to the shoplifting, I think it's critically important to understand that that's also dealing with those who are suffering from drug addiction, those who are continually stealing and convicted of 3 crimes over and over and over. These are people that need help, and we want them to get the help, and the criminal justice system can do that by mandatory drug rehabilitation programs.
And Ron, your question for the opponents.
Well, my question's simple. As a lawman that served this state for over 30 years and as a police chief now for almost a decade, I've got to ask the opposition, how can you consciously look a victim in the eye and tell them that certain crimes like rape of an unconscious person, pimping a child for prostitution, rape by intoxication, and the other 19 crimes that are not considered violent shouldn't be considered violent crimes, and those victims, perpetrators, should be eligible for early release? How do you do that?
Well, as I said, the largest crime victims groups in the state oppose the measure, and that's because they believe that rehabilitation and accountability is what is needed when it comes to violent crime. That's what they seek. And with regard to the label, whether we call it violent or not, these are horrific acts that demand accountability. And California punishes every crime you just mentioned harshly, extremely harshly in many cases, and up to and including a life sentence. And this proposition does nothing to change that. It doesn't increase punishment. It doesn't ensure convictions. It simply removes the incentive to rehabilitate once you're convicted of these crimes. 95% of people leave prison. They will get out. They will move into your neighborhood. They will participate in our society. And you have to ask yourself, would I rather have somebody who has participated in programming, learned a skill, made amends and sought accountability with their victims and come out a stable individual who's going to contribute to society? Or do I want somebody who's participated in gangs with no opportunity and no hope coming back out worse than they were when they went in? Sorry, I went over a little bit.